Talk Conversations brought to you by Barista. Hello, welcome to another fantastic edition of Think Talk Conversations as we're coming to you from the beautiful Barista Cafe, which of course is a new one that's opened in Nugegoda. And Think Talk Conversations is also about talking about inspirational leaders in their respective industry, how they've thought tall and they've moved on through the trials and of course become triumphant at the end of the day. Such leader or such individual, of course, we have on the show today. It's Yasodhara Pathanjali, who's of course on the show, and we're talking about something very interesting that really is pushing boundaries or could possibly push boundaries in Sri Lanka. And we are basically talking about the Independent Collective School in Sri Lanka, which is an alternative education shaped school, and we're going to find out more details on that one. Firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Give us more details on ICS and the notion behind it before we move into more serious questions.
How long do we have? So ICS is, the way I try to shrink it down, is we are Sri Lanka's first modern school.
Right.
Preparing all ages of children for an AI future.
Okay.
That's the shortest I can bring it. What that really means is that the education system anywhere in the world, not just in Sri Lanka, hasn't really upgraded or changed in last 100 years. We are still doing the O-levels and A-levels that our grandparents and our parents did.
Right.
But the world has changed.
Right.
Even in the last 5 years, the world has changed unrecognizably. And we have some quite disturbing statistics out there about what our children of the future will face when they go into work, the kind of employment that will be available to them. And the schools are really not doing anything to prepare them for that. Maybe there'll be like small things like STEM coming in and all of that, but not drastic enough for the way that the world is changing. So we're the first school in Sri Lanka to really address that and to be very focused on that, because we don't care about anything else.
Okay. So we're going to get into the details of the school in just as we move on with the story on the show. But what inspired you to establish ICS, and how do you envision this approach impacting the educational landscape in Sri Lanka? Because I am sure you most probably have already or will have a lot of pushback.
So to break it down, inspirational wise, I was homeschooled. My kids have been homeschooled up till February this year. So my entire life has been in alternative education. I started tutoring when I was about 14.
Okay.
Because I did like sort of O-level maths when I was younger.
Right.
So from around the age of 14, I was tutoring and helping people getting ready for their O-levels, even though I was younger than them.
Right.
And for me, the school doesn't necessarily come to me from an education point of view, but more from a children's rights and welfare of children point of view. Because when we look around us, it's a simple thing. We have the Human Rights Convention, which has almost 50 points. Something like 30-something points of the Human Rights Convention are violated by the education system against children. There's the other thing that says, prisoners around the world have more rights than children in school. And so when you look at that, we don't really give our children the space and respect that they need in order to develop and be nurtured to become wholesome adults. And then we look at the problems in society and we say, why is there so much drug abuse? Why is there so much violence? Why is there so much unemployment? Why are people, suicide rates? We look at a lot of these things, domestic violence, and a lot of it gets rooted back. So for me, I had a very tough childhood, and these are thoughts that I had while I was going through that as a child. So at age 10 or something, I started thinking about these things. And then through my life, all the different experiences, the different kinds of work I've been involved in, it's finally culminated here.
So what makes you the person to actually start this alternative education? What makes you the right person to do it? Is it because you were homeschooled? Does that give you experience to start something like this?
I don't think I would ever say that I'm the right person. I don't think any human can ever be the right person.
Okay.
I'm just the one that did it.
Right.
right? And it has to be a permanent learning curve. If I ever sit back and say I'm the right person, or I got it right, or that my school is perfect, or that we have the only solution, then I've lost the plot.
Right.
And I should never be, I want to always, even 10 years down our journey, we should always be learning, we should always be looking for feedback, looking to learn. That's the journey, right? But no part of my life, personal and professional, has ever really been inside a box. So I've always been a bit of an outsider, always kind of made my own way in life.
Right.
Whether it comes to marriage, whether it comes to parenting, whether it comes to anything that I've done. I mean, I did give up the UK and move to Sri Lanka, which everybody thinks is bonkers.
Right.
I think it's just, I'm the one that did it. I really hope I'm not the only one that will do it later in the coming years. I really hope that there's more change, because I get quite freaked out when I look at the statistics of really what's coming post 2030 in the world with AI. And there is no way, I mean, ICS is expanding currently into other cities in Sri Lanka, but even with that expansion, we can't possibly even dream of catering to all children in Sri Lanka. Right. So I should not be the right person or the only person. This needs to be much bigger than me.
How do you balance the challenges of introducing innovative teaching techniques and staying true to your vision by obviously providing the inclusive learning environment that you are stepping out for the kids out there? How do you make that balance?
So I was the keynote speaker at the Global Democratic Schools Conference in Nepal last year.
Right.
And as soon as I landed in Nepal at the conference, it was a week-long affair. Everybody, and it was all similar schools to mine from around the world who had flown in. And everybody kept asking me, oh, so your school is starting, because this conference was in October. My school opened in January, so it wasn't open yet.
Right.
And everybody kept saying to me, so what model are you using for the school? And this question really bothered me.
Right.
Because the whole principle of ICS is to provide a personalized curriculum to make sure every child that comes through our doors gets to become the very best that they can be. So even if you take you and me, your strengths are not mine and my strengths are not yours.
Right.
That doesn't make one of us better or worse than the other. It's just we should be celebrated for who we are.
Sure.
So if that is how we look at the workplace, that is how we look at adults, it's really urgent that we look at our children like that. Right? So in order to give that attention, to give the right or the best that we can per child, I can't come to it with a model and say, I'm right, this is the model, this is what we're doing. Every child that comes through our doors, we have to look at and say, what is the best we can provide for you? So the cocktail of students and staff that I have at any given time, at any given branch, has to be just that fingerprint, that cocktail. So I try to think of it that way. That's the leadership that I take on board when I look at all the aspects of the school. So we are not sticking to one specific thing. We have a certain amount of principles and ethos, but we are very aware that it has to change for every student.
Now, how long has ICS been in the making, so to say? I mean, you've been homeschooled, you've homeschooled your kids. Clearly, this has been in your mind for a very, very long time. How long has it been in the making till it actually became a reality in January?
So my entire life, I would say this, when I was really young, I used to dream of having a boarding school in Sigiriya. So I didn't grow up in Sri Lanka, so I used to come on holiday here. And every time we were sort of in the Dambulla Sigiri area, I used to even just like driving around, just used to daydream. I wonder where I'll put my boarding school. This will be so perfect, blah, blah, blah. The reason for Dambulla was because of the farming, and it's actually a very interesting part of the country because you have the agriculture, you have the history, you have all kinds of different, thank you so much. Green tea, my favorite. And I really always thought of this boarding school as something that would happen when I was old.
Okay.
So as a child, that most probably meant like 50 plus. I think as I got older, it was like 60 plus, right? It gets pushed back. And then the economic crisis of Sri Lanka, that really accelerated things because It was a period in Sri Lanka where
I
I
would
saw.
think, sorry to interrupt you there, I would think the lockdowns and COVID would have actually accelerated this. Because
No.
that's exactly what kids were doing at that point.
Actually, not true. This is something that actually at the time was very frustrating for me. So, okay, little bit of a backtrack. When my kids started homeschooling back in the UK, I was involved in setting up and running 2 different homeschooling communities back home.
Okay.
2 because I moved from one city to another. So I had this habit of one getting involved in the communities, and then when I moved, starting my own because the city I moved into didn't have a homeschooling community. So this was something that I really had started getting a lot of practice with. And then when I moved to Sri Lanka in 2016, I realized there were families who were homeschooling, but there was no community. So I started that. So I set up the Facebook page, and we kind of snowballed from there. So from 2016 till COVID, we used to do the odd meetups and the sort of get-togethers in the park, go to the museum, those kind of excursions, whatever, discussions for the parents to support each other and all of that. And then, as you said, the lockdown happened, global, right? Not just in Sri Lanka, but globally, people got very confused with the word homeschooling. What during COVID parents did was virtual learning and not homeschooling. It just happened that the word homeschooling just got confused with it all, because what they were doing was they would take content and delivery managed by an institute and just do it from home. That's virtual learning. When I was a child, it was called distance learning. Now it's called virtual learning. Homeschooling is where the content and delivery is designed and created by the home. So that could be whoever the adults, or it could be a joint effort with the children, but it comes from the home, not from an external party. So any time a student is engaging with content and delivery that is run by an external party, it's virtual learning, not homeschooling. So that was the thing, and so there's a lot of confusion. So during COVID, I was very involved in trying to educate people about this and talk about it. But no, it was the economic crisis that really brought the school a good couple of decades forward in my timeline. Yeah.
Now, in the face of societal norms and resistance to change traditional education with homeschooling, like ICS has basically been introduced, how would you navigate the complexities introducing this type of learning to the education industry? And what is the pushback that you've actually received so far?
None.
None.
I don't feel like pushback, none. Ignorant criticism, sure.
Apprehension? Not sure about this, is it going to work?
I think for any parent who's still apprehensive, what that tells me is that they don't know what's coming, and they have not been able to engage with, McKinsey reports, UN reports. It's all there. The UN mandate for education, highlighting that subject-based education should no longer be carried out, was 5 years ago in 2019. I don't need to come and say this. It's been there all this time. It's just parents are not engaging. Parents are still doing the whole, like, my kid needs the piano lessons and the shishatve, and they're very trapped in a cycle of just thinking
Tradition?
about...
Would you call that tradition?
I don't want to call it tradition.
Or would you call it societal norms?
I'm going to call it panic.
Panic?
Yeah. I think it's a sense of, like, that jumping from the frying pan to the fire because the frying pan's hot. So they just jump. You don't look, because your immediate situation might be difficult, or your immediate fears, your short-term fears are there. So people make decisions based on that instead of based on a long-term vision. But when we talk about our children, you need a long-term vision, because now I have 3 children, 13, 10, and almost 2.
Right.
You don't make decisions for their health, their education, or anything else based on information you have today. You have to look at the information we have on what 50 years will look like, 80 years will look like. Because my children, that's when my children have to live, right? That's the world we have to prepare them for. So if people are making decisions based on the next 2 years, the next 5 years, you're never going to make the right decisions. So I don't want to call it tradition. I don't want to call it any of those things. I think it's a sense of, I think there's also a lot of bombardment from the industry.
What type of bombardment?
I've been pretty shocked. When I was a kid, not even when I was a kid, when I went to university 20 years ago, 21 years ago, or when I was doing my A-levels, how we approached higher education was subject, content of the course, lecturers, the academic respect of the course, right? So we really cared about, is this the right course for me? In terms of my interests, does it align? Is this course exactly what I want to study? Is the content correct? And there was a lot of thought that went to, not just from me, but this was the culture, right? And our parents' generation even more. Today, you look at, you can drive around Colombo, you can drive around any part of Sri Lanka, and you look at all the advertising, even Facebook, social media, everywhere. You look at the advertising for education, all from school, from preschool, all the way through school to higher education. Every ad, and I've been keeping track of it now. I've become conscious of it. It just says like, migrate. There is no more, so they don't even anymore really say what subject you're studying or what the content is or why it's valuable or how it can empower you, enrich your life, how it can develop you. It just says migrate. So people are no longer learning or educating themselves to become the best version of themselves. A visa is not a passport to a successful life, because you can get a visa, fine. But even with a visa, you still need knowledge, skills, development, and all of that to be able to make a success, even in another place. But if we're not doing both, I don't understand the logic. So every ad, billboards all over Sri Lanka, it's just like, it just says like education something something and then like a plane. So the imagery has really changed. So as a school, I just want to talk about education because this is about personal development, and there's also much greater change happening in the world where other countries are becoming less employable. There are major mental health and skill gaps in the US and Europe coming up, which will make them less attractive. Right. So we've got to gear up to fill the gap. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff, really great opportunities coming our way, but people aren't really aware of those things, people aren't looking for those things. It's just this working from a very short-term panic and jumping into education, but without development.
Now, what advice would you give to parents and educators who are seeking alternative education options for their kids based on your experiences of establishing ICS and promoting future forward education? What would the advice that you would actually give?
Stop decision making based on short-term fears.
Okay.
And just look at all that stuff is there, as I said. All the experts about AI, all the experts on employment for the future, all the predictors are there. It's all available. And work backwards. So another difference I see from the ICS approach to traditional education approach is traditional education takes a child at age 2, 3, 4, whatever. And then it's a very blinkered approach where you're just focusing on the next step. So if you're 4, we'll just get you through to grade 1. And then it's just pass into grade 2. So it's a very blinkered approach where you're just looking at the next foot that you're putting forward. You're not looking at where you're going. Whereas in my school, we work the other way. So I take the kid and I say, what do you want in your life when you're 80? Tell me. What do you want then? So in order to have that at 80, what do you need to have at 70? What do you need to have at 60? What do you need to have at 50? And then we work backwards, right? And then we start to understand, well, actually, what year will I be 80 in? Okay, so it's going to be this year. What will the world look like? What are the skills that we will need? We can't predict it fully, but some of the information is there. Or some of the risks that those children will face, they are very readily available. I mean, one of the most used statistics now is this: beyond 2030, 86% of the jobs that will be available global, we are blind to today. 2030 is 6 years from today. So in 6 years' time, globally, the jobs that will be available, we don't know. 86% is in the dark, which means we only know about 14%, which is abysmal. So what is it that we're educating our kids for if we have this huge blind spot, right? So having a blind spot means that we've got to work a lot smarter than doing what we've always done. So parents really need to become much, much more educated about the risks and the real dangers that are coming our way, and not the dangers they're going to face in 2 years' time.
But you do state the fact that you ask kids as to what you're going to be when you're 80 or what you're going to be when you're 70. But sometimes kids don't even know what they're going to be when they're, to make a decision to go to university at 18, they don't know what they want to be.
Yeah.
So how is that possible?
So we're very careful that we never ask what do you want to be. So because the answer to that is like, lawyer, doctor, singer, pop star, social media influencer, whatever, right? So we don't focus on what do you want to be. We ask for what do you want your life to be like.
All right, okay.
So that is a much wider question, because then you get health.
Right.
Your mental health, physical health, wealth, right? Because if you ask now all the older kids in my school, when we've asked them this question, the number one thing they say is, I want to be a digital nomad and be able to travel. So then you're not saying what industry you'll be in, but what is the lifestyle that you want, right? So once we understand, so to become a digital nomad, you need a certain amount of wealth, you need possibly a good passport, you need a job that you can do remotely. So then it breaks it down. So you know the skills you need, which are transferable, right? So it's more about envisioning your lifestyle going forward than about like that very narrow thing of saying, what do you want to be?
Were you ever in a position where, while setting up ICS, the challenges that you obviously encountered to set up ICS, were you ever in a position where you just decided to just throw in the towel?
Every day.
Every day?
Today.
Today?
Today.
Why? What makes you
No.
what makes you do that?
No. Not as a business, not as an organization, but it's tough leading it. It's very tough. And I am somebody who has suffered from panic attacks since I was a very young kid. Actually, I don't remember a time when I didn't suffer from panic attacks. And when I was a child, I genuinely, because I didn't know what panic attacks were.
Right.
I believed that I had like a bad heart condition.
Right.
Because I kept getting these really bad chest pains when I was a kid, really small kid.
Right.
And I literally got my heart scanned like in my early 20s because I was so convinced that I had a heart issue. And doctors just kept saying, no. But it's actually really sad. At no point those doctors also say, wait a second, this is what it is. So I was like 30, 31 when I found out what was actually going on.
At 30, 31?
Yeah, and I'm 39 now, so it's not been that long.
Right.
So for me, this last 10 years, I've worked really hard on all of that stuff. But when you suffer from anxiety, and it's a very physical response to situations. So earlier, like I think up to about 5 years ago, it had the better of me.
Right.
But now it's there, but I kind of know how to deal with it, and I've worked really, really hard on it. So it's very easy for me to kind of just go, but I don't show it anymore, not in an unhealthy way, but I know what works for me. And also, no matter, that's why I said it's not about me being the right person, because this was never supposed to be about me.
Right.
I actually, in the next couple of years, I'm looking to take a step back and let the school do its thing. Because at the moment, everybody knows it as my school. And that's great, because at the start, people in Sri Lanka, since I moved here, they know what I stand for. They've seen me in various different spaces, and they kind of have an idea. and that's what the school needed, which is fine. But the long-term vision, I need to step back and let the school build its own identity. But yeah, so balancing me, the very personal me, with being the head of a brand at the moment, it's very tough.
Well, that basically leads us into our final question right now. You were just talking about the future of ICS. Now, looking ahead, what are your aspirations for the future of ICS and the impact that you hope to make in reshaping the educational structure that you so strongly believe in? And I mean, there must be a certain part of you would like the education ecosystem in the country to pick up with what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And obviously there are certain boundaries for that. There are certain boulders that are pushing them back. But what would be your aspiration for the future of ICS moving forward?
That comes in a bunch of phases. So we've been open pretty much now bang on 3 months.
Right.
It feels about 10 years.
Right. The amount of work
I've
gone in.
aged horribly the last 3 months. Like, my hair has actually gone more grey. I didn't have this much visible grey in January, and now I do.
Right.
But that's part of the journey, and I'm not knocking it. It's great. So we've got Colombo branch is kind of getting to a place where we are settling. Kids are happy. Kids are actually doing incredibly, and I'm so proud of them.
Right. How many kids do you have, if I may ask?
So we started with around 40, 45.
Wow, okay.
And we're going to see like quite a big uptick in numbers in May after the out of the holidays.
Right.
So my day is a lot of the time taken up with doing interviews, because right now I'm the only one who does interviews.
Right.
Just have to make sure that the family really fits with the school and what we stand for. But literally this morning I was in Sidua looking at our next branch.
Right.
We might have found a property, so I'm quite excited about that.
Nice.
Next is Kandy. I think we also kind of have found a property there. I just have to find time to go to Kandy and look at it properly.
Right.
So once those two are set up, we move to Gaul, and then sort of Panadura Moratua Bandaragam section. So we'll put one school there.
Right.
Beyond that, I haven't thought too much from a practical element, because that's a lot to do, and we want to do it in quite a short time. So ideally by this time next year, we should have all of that done. So moving quite fast.
You're moving quite fast, I was just about to say.
But the parent demand is heavy.
Right, okay.
So it's not that we're moving fast, it's just they're kind of pulling us. Because I'm getting complaints from parents that we haven't come there yet.
Right.
So I'm kind of going with that. And beyond that, and also we've launched the homeschooling arm of ICS.
Okay.
So going back to my roots.
Right.
And we've just launched it this month in April, where we've set up a community for parents who want to continue homeschooling, so that we can provide them the community and the support. So we've done that as well. So we have all our different elements now coming in. We're launching an adult learning college for the adults as well, so that they can learn.
Right.
But beyond that, I'd love to get involved in, that's why I said I need to take a step back from the school once those branches are set up. I want to get into rural education, where we move away from the international model, where we are fee charging.
Right.
And see how we can subsidize and take this kind of education to rural or people who can't afford to pay, because they shouldn't have to miss out. Right. But I couldn't start there because there's no way to fund it otherwise, right? So yeah, getting involved in that. I'd love to get involved in just consultancy and seeing how we can, enhance the progress in Sri Lanka in terms of...
That's a lot on your plate.
I'm a lot on my plate kind of person, so I'm good. And I'm turning 40 this year, so on a personal note, I am going to make my first movie, because that was my childhood dream, was to become a filmmaker, film director. So my first movie, so in the time I'm in my 40s, so from this year to the next 10 years, make my first movie, and I'm a huge stand-up comedy fan, so I want to do my first set.
Of stand-up comedy?
Yeah, so I have 10 years to accomplish 2 very personal goals.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
No, you made it easy.
Did I?
Yeah, you are like super chill.
Thank you so much. And also, you also stand for a lot of values as far as non-plastic user.
Yes.
So now we just wanted to let you know that you can swing by any barista outlet, because these cups, by the way, Think Tall cups.
Yeah.
they are not plastic? They
So
are biodegradable.
little anecdote. I won't name the chain, but a different coffee chain in Sri Lanka. I bullied them into saying they were going to make it biodegradable, and they kind of made that promise for our wedding, and then they never did it.
Okay.
So I just, as you know this, as we sat down, I found out that this is actually fully that, because a lot of people say this is biodegradable, but the cup usually has that plastic lining inside, right? So, I mean, this does say 100% biodegradable. So I'm super excited. So now I know, I don't drink coffee, but I know where I have to hang out now.
You can hang out at any of the barista outlets.
Yeah.
They're all over Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
So to say.
Okay, I'll now start looking, because I actually completely disregarded the whole coffee shop industry because of these issues, because I don't use plastic.
Right.
But now I can.
Just as much
I'll
we
start
learned something today, you learned something today too.
Yeah.
Great.
We have to keep lifelong
Of
learning.
course.
It's super important.
Of course, of course.
Thank you for this.
Once again, thank you so much for swinging
My
by
pleasure.
and Yasodhara on the show. Thank you very much for being a part of it. Think Tall Conversations with Barista, as we basically bring you inspirational leaders as pushing the needle in Sri Lanka in their respective industries. Till we speak to you for the next one, have yourself a good one, and we'll be back with Think Tall Conversations with Barista very soon.